All right. Welcome back to the Mark Moses Show. We are taping this on a Wednesday night because this man is super busy. But I found him on Twitter and I said, I got to get him on. And since I work from home, I can make anything happen right now with interviews. I don't have to go to the office anymore. This guy is a great, great journalist and author. And he wrote a book about one of my favorite games of all time. He lives there in Columbus, Ohio, even though I don't know if it's going to be called that moving forward. But for right now, it's Columbus, Ohio. His name is Reyan Ali, and he wrote NBA Jam, the book. Reyan, my man, how you doing today?
I'm doing all right. Thank you so much for having me.
I like when he came on to the Zoom call originally, it said Ray. So should I call you Ray or Reyan?
You can call me Ray if you want. The friends do that, and I think I set up the Zoom call back when I didn't know Zoom was to be used for anything besides my friends. But you know what? You're a friend, man. You can call me Ray if you want.
I like it. All right. Well, I'm going to start with this. Because we're having him on, and you have a great book, One Up Arcades, or Arcade One Up, I always get it confused. They've come out this month with the NBA Jam machine. Now, I already own a Mortal Kombat cabinet from them, and I just got the Marvel superheroes. As you could tell, as a single man with no kids, I can make these moves, right? They've come out the NBA Jam. I saw it today at a Walmart. I saw it in person. But I'm going to just show you this. I had to go get an original copy for you. I had to.
Oh.
Now look at this. This was off eBay for $20. If you can't, I know if you're on the radio, I'm just going to describe it. This is an original Sega Genesis cartridge, mint condition. And if you look inside, has the cartridge and the manual as well. Everything. I had to buy it. I had this game when I was 11 years old. I even had the 4-button port so that you could have 4 controllers. I love this game so much. I really do. So thank you for coming on today, Ray.
Oh man, thank you so much for having me. And what an awesome surprise seeing the cartridge in such good condition really takes me back to like, wow, that excitement when you'd open up that new game. There's something different about a CD versus a cartridge. Plus, nowadays games don't come with manuals like they used to. So it's so good to see it there, just looking pristine and fresh.
And it still works. I played it.
Ooh.
It really
That's
does.
awesome. You got to test drive it, man. You got to test it.
No, seriously, Ray. And I'm going to call you Ray. I don't care. I'm going with
Go
it.
for it.
Here's what's funny. So I have a 65-inch 4K TV, and I was playing Sega Genesis NBA Jam on it off the actual cartridge. That's what I was doing. Just for you, buddy.
I appreciate it, man. I appreciate it. Look, in 2020, that's what happens. We go and we play old games on the best TVs possible. This is the new world we live in. No, that sounds great, man.
Let's start with the obvious. Tell us about the book. You wrote a 190-page book on NBA Jam. Tell us about the book, buddy.
I did. Yeah. So yeah, like you said with that great introduction, writer from Columbus, Ohio, was a music journalist for many years. So I wrote for Wired, for Rolling Stone, The Atlantic, Spin, all kinds of different places, all over the place. And I knew I really wanted to do something more substantial than just doing music articles like I was doing. Like these were short things. Like if you open up like your weekly newspaper and you see the music preview, that'd be the kind of piece that I was writing at that time. So I was a freelance writer for many years. And then in 2015, I found this publisher, Boss Fight Books, that publishes individual books about video games. So to do like one book about Super Mario Brothers 2 by one author, then another book about Super Mario Brothers 3 by a separate author, and then a Galaga one by a third. So they had this open call for pitches in 2015. So after writing for several years, I was like, boy, I would really love to do something substantial. I'd love to do a book, love to really sink my teeth into something. But what is something out there that is really worth pitching on? Like, what is a video game that has a story behind it that I can really dedicate enough time to make it really good? So I really racked my brain. And then I was like, oh, obviously NBA Jam. And it just seems so obvious in hindsight. I'm surprised it even took me 5 minutes to think of it. Because I mean, NBA Jam is just such an iconic game for so many reasons. I mean, the memories are so strong. Your memories are strong. My memories are so strong. I grew up playing it in Pakistan, actually. Yeah. So I've got a different experience than some other people, but I still have this, we all have this same common love for NBA Jam, that amazing fast 2-on-2 action, he's on fire, boom shakalaka. There's so much in there. So back in 2015, I started this journey, and I was like, oh, it's going to take me like a year or two to write this book. It won't be too bad. Ended up taking me 4 years, but it was for the best because I ended up doing a lot of research and getting a lot of good material out of it. I did 68 interviews So I talked to tons of folks. Yeah. So just some quick highlights off the top. DJ Jazzy Jeff, George Clinton, a couple of the classic secret characters. Shaq, I got to talk to for the book, which was awesome. Glenn Rice, the Midway guys, of course, the people who actually made the game. But my real idea was I wanted to see what it's like to, let's go inside the development of NBA Jam. How did this huge phenomenon come to be?
You were in Pakistan. And take us back, because I know we're around the same age.
Yeah.
Was it at a restaurant or a store? When was the first time you saw the game?
First time I saw the game, I remember this very distinctly, which is funny that I ended up writing this whole book about it and spending all this time on it. But yeah, I remember it was probably 94, 95 or so, right when Tournament Edition had come out, maybe 95 or 96 at this point. So I'd have been just about 9 or 10. And I saw this ad on the back of a Superboy comic book for NBA Jam Tournament Edition. And man, just the colors of this ad were just amazing to me. I mean, I saw the Supersonics logo and it just popped. I saw that New York Knicks logo and I was like, wow, what's this? This is super cool. Now, keep in mind that, I knew what the NBA was, but growing up in Pakistan, the NBA wasn't really a thing. Over there, you play cricket. And they've got other sports too. They love, they love tennis, they love squash, they love football, some other things. But basketball, it's more just a play. You don't really follow it. So that's actually where I learned of the NBA for the first time too. So in that one ad, I learned about NBA Jam. I played this game. I loved it. I fell in love with the NBA, became a huge NBA fan years past that. And then, yeah. And I mean, for me, like my iconic experience, or at least the experience that I think of, is sitting at the foot of the bed or sitting on the floor, playing it on the Sega Mega Drive 2, which is the European version of the Sega Genesis. Yeah. So it's funny. I mean, we're having the same kind of experience in different parts of the world at different times.
What's really cool, I know this is turning into a love for Sega. I actually have the new Mini. I have it. And it's cool. Yeah. You could do the settings where it does American where it's in Genesis, and you could turn it Japanese and it's all Mega Drive stuff.
Exactly.
The different languages.
Yeah.
That's really cool, man. It really is. Where Tournament Edition. So did you pick from Pakistan? Did you pick a favorite team because of NBA Jam? Like, is there I'm a Bulls fan now? What happened, Ray?
Definitely. I got started with the Supersonics. There was something about the logo. I mean, yeah, if you're a Bulls fan, then you and I, we probably should not be doing this interview. But yeah, it was, no, I love the Supersonics. The logo was fantastic. I mean, it's a silly thing, but as a kid, you see pretty colors. You're just like, oh, wow, this looks like a cool team. And then I got to know about Sean Kemp and Gary Payton, of course, and that whole Supersonics era. I loved them. Yeah, man, as a kid, I loved everybody that was against the Bulls. Because I was following it from abroad. I would get basically bits and pieces. And of course, this is pre-internet. This is, not even late 90s. This is around the mid-90s. So, I just had bits and pieces of what was going on in the NBA. But I always knew that I did not like Michael Jordan because he always beat the guys who I wanted to win. The Jazz, I always wanted the Magic to really come through. That classic Shaq and Penny squad, that never happened. Them getting a championship. But no, I had a whole bunch of teams, and it was really interesting. I mean, I had a totally different experience than a lot of fans in the way that I learned it all secondhand. And, of course, nowadays, if you have the internet, it's not a big deal. You can watch anything from anywhere. But back then, there would be like one montage at the end of a CNN sports report or something like that, and that would be all the NBA I'd get to watch. Otherwise, it was all basketball cards, video games, magazines, newspapers, things like that.
I know this is nerdy to say, and our listeners know, but I want you to know this. So I went to Europe back in December before the craziness. I actually got to travel. So I was in Barcelona, and I really think that is the birthplace of international basketball because of the Dream Team, because they played the Olympics there. So you're walking around downtown Barcelona, and there's an NBA store, and they know about Steph Curry, and they know about LeBron James.
Absolutely.
And I was walking around, and what's funny in Barcelona is this really meant a lot to me because I love the NBA. I cover it now with the Orlando Magic. It's like I'm walking by a neighborhood and there's a park and there's a basketball rim, full court, and on the court it says NBA cares. NBA, it's a global game. So it's really cool. It's really cool hearing your stories from your perspective.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Yeah. And I mean, that was really the era when the NBA was really taking off like that. I mean, the NBA, of course, Magic Johnson and Larry Bird were stars. But in the 90s is when the NBA went to another level because of Michael Jordan and then all those other fantastic talents. I mean, not to put any of them down, but of course, Jordan, of course, was so iconic that it's really fun. NBA wasn't a big thing over there, but what was a big thing? Was Space Jam. So yeah, when we were like 11 and 12, I still have them over here. I've got a box of them. I should probably bust them out. I've got all these old Space Jam stickers. It got to be so popular that there were pirated Space Jam stickers. No joke. Yeah. That's how coveted these sticker book stickers were. So no NBA, but we did get Space Jam.
What do you love about NBA Jam? You have, as a fan, I mean, you wrote a whole book about it, and I have more questions about the book. But what do you love about it? Because everyone loves it, but what do you love about playing it?
Absolutely. I love the feeling that anything can happen. I love the feeling that I spent 4 years of my life on this. I wrote a book about it, and I've done all this stuff. And I still feel like maybe somewhere in the code, there's one other secret character we don't know about, or there's some other cool story that'll come of something. I mean, NBA Jam really gets my imagination going when you think about the secret players that came from it, like Bill Clinton, and of course, DJ Jazzy Jeff, the Fresh Prince, Prince Charles, all these people. So my mind really goes towards that secret aspect and the idea that, like, you know, there's so many things that we see in NBA Jam, like, that are so cool, but there's so many amazing secrets out there that are hidden that really is what gets me going. First and foremost when I think about it, but then otherwise, it's such a great game. I mean, it still holds up. I mean, you can play it for hours, and it still is actually interesting to play.
All right. I've been playing sports video games my whole life, and I want your take on this. The
Yeah.
thing that makes, and I feel like I need to just keep showing this. I don't have what I need, okay, moving forward, I need to buy a copy of your book, and you have to sign it for me. You have to send it, buddy. I need one.
I appreciate it. I would love to.
The thing I love about it is I actually have control of these characters, like 100%. Because you play NBA, like little kids, this is where I sound old. NBA 2K is a great game, but I never feel like I have full control or like I'm powerful. When I'm playing NBA Jam to this day, I know where to go on the court. I know how to play defense. I know how to shoot the three. I know when to dunk. I know what players are good. I feel like I'm actually playing the game. That's why it holds up. And I'll tell you this. So there's a bar in Orlando I go to called Joysticks, where it's got all the retro games, right? And you're drinking beer and everything. So my favorite is I'm 38. No one wants to play me. If you are 25 years old, I will destroy you at this game. I hope you know.
I can believe it. Absolutely, I can believe it. Yeah. I mean, it's like those old veteran skills. You honed those. You trained those for years. I mean, that was your dojo. NBA Jam was your dojo. And, you know, you're out there in the open world. You're a very dangerous man.
I am. Hey, I still know all the moves to Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat, and NBA Jam. I wouldn't
mess with you. If I saw you in an arcade game, I would walk the other direction. I'll tell you that right now.
As you should. We are here with Reyan Ali. He is the author of NBA Jam. Okay. You talked to all those different people. What did you learn that really just kind of shocked you? Is there any moments that really stood out from some of these interviews you did?
Yeah, I think what really ultimately stood out to me was just how big NBA Jam was. Because, of course, we all have our own personal memories of it, but just kind of overall how big it was. That was one of the things that was really surprising to me. So this is the stat I love to bust out. So Jurassic Park in 1993, Jurassic Park, of course, was the biggest movie anywhere. I mean, Jurassic Park was culture. I mean, that was everything. And that earned something like $374 million at the box office in 1993. And of course, Jurassic Park, inescapable. They even named a basketball team basically because of Jurassic Park. Yeah. So it had such an impact. Meanwhile, NBA Jam, an arcade game, made $1 billion, $1 billion in that same year. So it basically tripled the amount of money that Jurassic Park brought in, but it did it a quarter at a time, a token at a time. And so you're talking about 4 billion tokens / quarters, which is just what? That's just such a head trip to think about. And that 1 billion figure that NBA Jam made in the first year, even that is on the low side. So I was really surprised by how popular it was. I mean, people were lining up all over to play it. I mean, I got to talk to Glenn Rice for the book, and he was lining up at an arcade in Miami around this time because he was on the Heat, and he would line up at the arcade to play as himself in NBA Jam. And I was just like, wow, what an amazing image! Like, you're in the arcade, and there's Glenn Rice back, and behind you in line. He wants to play as himself in NBA Jam. That's how popular the game was. So really, like, learning about that love was really cool. When I got to talk to Shaq, he talked about how he always wanted to play as three-point shooters. He always wanted to be Chris Mullin or Reggie Miller, somebody who could nail that three, because he couldn't do that himself in real life. So he was using NBA Jam in a way that you described earlier, where it's like, you have control of those players. Like in this case, Shaq really felt that he had a lot of control, and he said he was really good at it. He told me some ridiculous score that he once got. I'm not entirely sure he got it, but it's Shaq. I'm not going to be like, Shaq, you didn't get 119 to 20 or whatever you told me, but I will. But you know what? I will believe you. You know, you are Shaq Diesel.
Well, how did you get Shaq? Did you call him on the phone? How did you do this?
Oh man, this was quite the saga. Yeah, I went digging. I tried to find out, okay, how can I get in touch with him? So yeah, I did. I looked around to find his agent, and I think I eventually talked to somebody. I think it was at TNT, and then they took me to someplace else. But yeah, it took me 5 months to get him for this thing for just 20 minutes. But man, it was totally worth it. I mean, I remember distinctly where I was when I got the call. So at my day job, I work in digital marketing. Nothing particularly exciting, but all my coworkers know that I'm working on this NBA Jam book. This is back in 2016. And then one day I got a text from Shaq's agent that said, okay, you know, he's going to be able to talk today. So I've been trying to track him down for like 4 or 5 months. So I'm like, okay, this is great. But I have an appointment at this time. So I ended up having an appointment with this insurance agent that I had to cancel to be like, I'm sorry, you know, something came up. I didn't tell him. I got Shaq potentially calling me in the other room. I got to go take Shaq's call instead of yours, my buddy.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So eventually I did get him. Yeah. And when he called me, it was on an unknown number. And when the moment I got to like actually hear him and he said, hello, it was just like, oh my gosh, like the fanboy in me came out a tiny little bit. Doesn't come out often, but a little bit. It was like, oh my God, it's Shaq, man.
Okay. Why is he not in the home console versions of this game? Why is he only in the arcade? Why? I want him in the home version.
Absolutely. It's all because of money. That's what it all comes down to in all these situations. So it happened with Michael Jordan in NBA Jam, happened with Charles Barkley in NBA Jam. So yeah, Shaq was part of the original game in the arcade that was released. And then he was ultimately removed because of licensing issues. And I think something that had to do with it was probably Shaq Fu. If you remember that game, the Shaq fighting game, which was pretty bad. So it's funny to think that Shaq might have not have been in NBA Jam, so he could be in Shaq Fu instead. But what's weird is that he loved the game. I mean, he loved it passionately. Yeah. I mean, he's still willing to talk about it. But licensing wise, he knew what side of the bread is, which side of the bread is buttered.
Is there a version of the game where Michael Jordan is in it? Like, is there one of these machines somewhere?
It does exist. There is a special version that's out there, and it's only in a few different spots. So Michael Jordan actually was, or at least if not Michael Jordan himself, then somebody in Michael Jordan's camp was such a big fan of NBA Jam that they actually got in touch with Midway to have a special version of the game created. So he wasn't actually in the original game, of course, because of licensing issues, same way as with Shaq, except Jordan, of course, came first and he was never in there at all. But then NBA Jam got to be so big that he heard about it or somebody in his team heard about it and asked Midway for a special version. So yes, that special version is still out there. So Michael got a cabinet. And then I think, of course, there was Gary Payton who got some cabinets too, which was funny. I mean, he was very famous to be in NBA Jam for being in NBA Jam, but he was in a tournament edition. You go back and play that first game, he wasn't in there. So he got a special version where he was added early, and then Ken Griffey Jr. So the three of these guys, they all had some kind of connection, and there's a version out there of the game that, as far as I know, is still in Gary Payton's house. He still has it in mint condition that has Michael Jordan, Gary Payton, and Ken Griffey Jr. in it, which is just wild. So that is the holy grail of NBA Jam right there.
And look, in the history of video games, like there's the holy grail. What is it, like Nintendo World Championship?
Yes,
like that is that machine might be over $1 million if someone, you know what I mean? If you could get a hold of it.
Absolutely. If it's the real thing, that is going to, for years there was rumors that Michael Jordan's in NBA Jam. I mean, this was something funny that happened while working on the book is I would go through these old message boards because believe it or not, back in the early 90s, there were still these boards out there where they were in smaller communities, but message boards where people were talking about secrets. And there was a guy who said, I was at the Mall of America today and I played as Michael Jordan. I found this post itself. Yeah. And then somebody came on there to be like, no, you didn't. He's not in there. So it's so funny is that rumors have been around there for years. So if that cabinet actually existed and we got to see it, that would be incredible. So hopefully someday I've tried contacting Gary Payton's people. Nothing yet.
That is really cool, man. What's funny is I've had this conversation with Nick Anderson where I'm like,
oh, that's awesome.
You're not in. Okay. This is what's funny with Nick. He's not in the arcade, but you play as him because Shaq's not in the Genesis or Super Nintendo version.
Right.
If we did this as sports trivia, you're like, who's in the game? Nick Anderson, no, only in the home version. You know what's funny with the Sonics? So I like them with Detlef Schrempf. Gary Payton's on the game. I like you. I'm playing as Pippen and Grant, number one, which I think is the most famous team to play as. And then number 2 is Sean Kemp and Detlef Schrempf. I think they're the second best team in the game. Would you agree with that?
Boy, you haven't mentioned the Jazz. I feel like the Jazz got to be way up there. I mean, Malone and Stockton. I mean, those guys. That's a 1-2 combo. So I mean, I would put Malone and Stockton over all of those other ones because for me they represent so perfectly what NBA Jam can be. Because I mean, Pippen is he's fantastic, but we've also got Horace Grant over there who no hate on Horace Grant, but I feel like when it's Stockton and Pippen versus Pippen and Grant, I'd got to go with Stockton and Malone.
You're going.
I'm sorry,
with that.
Stockton. Yeah.
Oh, you're okay. It's okay. There's a lot of names here. I completely understand.
Yeah, you know what I mean. That'd be something if Pippen was on the Jazz. That would be weird. That'd be weird alternate reality. I couldn't really imagine that.
No, I can't. We're imagining things from 30 years ago. That's the other thing that's funny about this.
Right.
Tell us about the company that made this game, because they made some famous games out of Chicago, Illinois. Who are they?
Definitely. Yeah, they were called Midway Games. They were the preeminent American arcade game manufacturer back in the 90s and through parts of the 80s too. I mean, they were based out of Chicago, and they just had the run-of-the-mill of the classics. I mean, they did Mortal Kombat, they did NBA Jam, they did the Terminator 2 arcade game, the classic shooting game. They did Revolution X, the Aerosmith arcade game. They did, MLB Slugfest. There's just so many classic games that came from them. But, to me, their peak era was that early 90s time, where in 1992, you had Mortal Kombat come out, which is huge. Then NBA Jam comes out in 93. That's even bigger than Mortal Kombat. And then Mortal Kombat 2 comes out, which is even bigger than NBA Jam. So, Midway was just fascinating. Yeah, a bunch of guys. It was a pretty ragtag group in the way that there wasn't a whole lot of oversight for management in terms of what they could do versus what they couldn't do. So they would put all kinds of stuff in their games. But these guys, they poured their heart and souls into these games. And they really understood what were so great about arcade games. It was all about, quick reactions, doing something and receiving some kind of satisfaction quickly. But yeah, they were a really special group. So yeah, they were around for many years, and they finally folded in 2009 after a lot of bad financial decisions and some other things. But it was old Midway.
Remember, there's no internet either. They had to do this all from their office. There's no internet to help out anyone. How important was it for Midway to get the NBA license? Because I feel like if this is just jam and there's not real NBA players, I don't think it's a success. I don't. So how did they get that?
Yeah. No, I don't think it would be a success either to the same degree. I think that people would still love it and that it'd have a cult classic kind of vibe, but would not be what NBA Jam is, not by any stretch of the imagination. There was somebody named Roger Sharp who worked at Midway back in the day, and he was their licensing guy. So if he needed to get a license for a movie, like let's say the Terminator 2 license, he'd be the guy to go out and negotiate that. So he was in contact with somebody over at the NBA named Michelle Brown for about 8 or 9 months or so, trying to convince the NBA to grant their license to Midway. It's crazy to think, but at first when the NBA heard this pitch, they were like, this is a cool game. It looks great, but we really don't want to have our image associated with arcades. So they were really worried that arcades were seedy. They associated with Times Square of the 80s, because of course this was still the early 90s at this point. So it was still that, kind of gritty Times Square vibe. So they, for whatever reason, they always associated arcade games with Times Square and that kind of dirty vibe to it. So they said no to Midway, which is bizarre. In hindsight, like to turn down something like NBA Jam, but Roger Sharp over at Midway knew that it was going to be a hit. And he spent 9 months trying to get this license, all while the guys are working on the game in the background. So it's a pretty crazy story, thinking that somebody had to spend 9 months to convince the NBA to make this, which ended up being a hit right out the gate.
That's so crazy, man. It just, you never know with some of this stuff.
You never know. Yeah. And you take it for granted too, You think, okay, this is a huge hit. Of course, it was always predetermined to be a big hit. You know what I mean? It seems so obvious that people would love NBA Jam, but it isn't always so obvious when you actually go back and you see what led to NBA Jam becoming NBA Jam.
How did they get the players? Because there's no way they had, John Stockton and Karl Malone come to them to be digitized like it's Mortal Kombat. How did they do this, Ray?
Yeah. So what they did was they found this is one of the most amazing stories that I learned for the book, which was about this guy named Willie Morris Jr. and he was a bouncer in Chicago. He was a bouncer in a nightclub, and he played a street ball court in a day. So he was like a local legend around this area at this time. His nickname was Air Morris. I'm not sure if the Midway guys gave him that or he came to Midway with that, but incredibly athletic, very talented guy. A lot of Jordan-esque moves, which was very fitting because, of course, early 90s Chicago, and he's a big Jordan fan too. So Mark Turmel, the lead designer of NBA Jam, what was once going to some ball court for talent. I think he might have been at a university for this one. I forget it offhand. It's in the book. But yeah, he went out to some ball court, and there was Willie Morris Jr. playing over there. And Turmel approached him and said, I'm making a video game about basketball. I'd like you to be in it. And it's the early 90s, and some strangers said to you they want to put you in a video game, and you're just like, I don't know what you're talking about. But eventually, Turmel was like, come on by. You can just come by and do some moves for us, and we'll put you in the game. So Willie Morris comes by the following weekend, and then they tape him doing all kinds of different moves, the dunks, all of the different actions, the stealing, the falling, whatnot. So what they did was they eventually took Willie Morris's body, they cut off the head digitally, and they would put on Stockton's head or Malone's head or whomever's head, depending on which player it was. And they had 4 different people for 4 different body types. But that's how they did it.
That's incredible. All right, real quick. What about my boy Tim, Mr. Boom Shalakalaka, who's come on the show? I know I say it wrong every time. Kitzrow, that's how you pronounce it, I believe. Is that what?
Kitzrow.
Tim, and I butcher his name. Tim is a great guy, like one of the nicest guys you will ever meet.
Oh, yeah.
And I've had him on the show. I don't know he realizes how famous he is to people like me.
Right.
And it just, even when I talk to him on the phone, I start getting giddy because I'm talking to the voice of NBA Jam. What about you? I know you got to interview him for the book.
I did. Yeah. So I first reached out to Tim back when I started working on the book, probably 2015 or 16 is when I first started talking to him. So yeah, so it went from one phone interview to another phone interview. And I really spent a lot of time talking to him about the game and about the series and about his role in it. Because Tim is really one of those amazing heroes that's really unsung in some ways. I mean, Boom Shakalaka is iconic. You can walk into one of these arcades and ask any random person, Boom Shakalaka, or he's on fire. I mean, you could go to a video game convention and do the same kind of thing. But if I said, if I asked you what's the name of that person, then, you might not know. And no, Tim's story was really interesting. So he was an actor in the Chicago area. And, he was waiting tables at the time, and he was in a weekend band. He was a weekend warrior in some band. And that's how he met John Hay, who was the sound guy at Midway. So Mark Turmel, the same fellow I was talking about from the Willie Morris story a second ago, when they were putting together the commentary for the game, or rather than they're getting to the point where they're putting together the commentary, Turmel says to John Hay, NBA Jam sound guy, says, you should do the commentary for NBA Jam. You'd be fine for it. And John Hay actually was in another game. He was the voice of Raiden in the first Mortal Kombat game. So, he had done some stuff, but he was like, I'd rather not do it. I've got somebody else who could do it. And then he introduced Mark to Tim. And things went from there. So, yeah, Tim is just a fascinating character. He got paid something like somewhere between, well, just to give you an idea, he got paid $50 an hour for those original NBA Jam recording sessions. So Boom Shakalaka, He's on Fire, all that stuff came to life in this place that was called the Meat Locker, this tiny little room over in this office in Chicago. And, Tim got $50 an hour for it. And he thought, this is great. And then, of course, NBA Jam comes out, and it makes $1 billion. So Tim got paid something like anywhere between $1,500 to maybe $2,000, between $1,000 and $2,000 to work on the game, and there was no royalty option or anything like that built in. So he was somebody who got to see this amazing success, and then had to kind of find his way to work his way into what happened with it. So he's a hero of the story of NBA Jam, but he's also kind of a tragic figure. I mean, he's somebody who just gets screwed over time and time again, and he just never seems to catch that break when he really deserves it.
He's a hero to me. And he also did NFL Blitz. He was also the voice of that, which is that's why my dream fantasy scenario is I want a cabinet where it's NBA Jam and NFL Blitz. I want that to be the one together. So
the toggle. You could probably set that up. You could probably set that up, man. There's probably a guy out there. There's probably somebody who's had this exact same fantasy scenario. I'm like, I need this.
I know. See, what's weird is you don't really have the experience like when we were kids where you could go to the arcade, and it's not the same. It's just it's because, the machines at home, all the video games, It's more just for your home. But I miss those days. It was part of my youth. What about you, buddy?
Definitely. Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, the thing is that you have to, with arcades, are so special because you have to actually go and do something to play those games, you know? Like if I want to play my PS4, I can just go downstairs and do it or whatever. But if I want to play an arcade game, then I gotta get on over to some place. And there's that communal aspect of it too. You know, you don't know who might be there. You can play with strangers, playing with friends over there. Yeah, I was huge into the arcades, and that's really was where my love for NBA Jam actually it went into another direction when I actually got to play the arcade version. It's so funny when you think about it is that, you know, I wrote this book about it and I've spent so many years learning about it, but I didn't actually play the arcade version of NBA Jam until very relatively recently, like the last 10, 15 years or so.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, they didn't have it in Pakistan. I would have loved to, absolutely. If I'd seen it, I would have loved to play it. But I only ever had the Sega Genesis version, or the Mega Drive version. So it was years later when I found the real version, and of course I knew about it. I knew about the characters, I knew about the codes, and all these things. But it was like, wow, to actually see it and play real NBA Jam. I was probably in my early 20s at that point, and I was like, oh my god, I'm finally seeing it. So I mean, it's just such a special game. But yeah, there were arcades in Pakistan, but different ones. Like, you know, there was. I would play Mortal Kombat, but I wouldn't get Mortal Kombat 2 or 3. I'd play Street Fighter 2, but they wouldn't get some of the updates and so forth. But arcades were definitely a big part of my childhood too.
How long have you lived in the States then?
So I was born in the States and then moved there when I was little. So yeah, so I was born in Texas, moved there when I was 5, and then was there from 5 to 15. So all my formative years, the time when like American pop culture really like took a hold on me was when I was nowhere close to America. And then I moved back when I was 15. So I've been back since I was 15. So that 10-year gap from 5 to 15 was like a really defining period of my life, of course, and something that I really go back to and I thought of a lot when I was working on the book. But yeah, I've been back since 2001 is when I got back over here, when I moved back, coincidentally, just before 9/11. So what timing?
Do you have a favorite NBA team now?
Favorite NBA team now? Honestly, I haven't followed the league that much in the last couple of years nowadays.
That's awesome.
So
I love it. You've been busy. You've been busy.
I've got stuff going on. Yeah. No, actually, so being in Ohio, of course, I was following the Cavs Warriors saga, and I was there when like the Cavs won. I was in a bar in Columbus, or it was Buffalo Wild Wings, I think, and everybody was so happy. I mean, honestly, nowadays I don't really have a team, but I'm still campaigning to bring back the Sonics for that love. You know, if the Sonics came back, I would find a way to get out to see the Sonics first game back. But yeah, otherwise, I mean, I'm a real casual NBA fan nowadays. And in the last year or two, like, of course, that whole Cavs Warriors saga, that's way old news. And I've just been kind of out of the loop on it. But, you know, I always love going to a game.
Yeah, I don't blame you. You've been busy. Is it weird where people are like, hey, you're that NBA guy who wrote the NBA Jam book? Do you get that response now?
On occasion, I do. Is where, somebody brings me on to an interview, and they say, we've got NBA Jam the book here. And I'm like, this is great. I am now like the physical embodiment of NBA Jam, or at least NBA Jam in book form as a human being. And I'm like, you know what? There's much worse things to be called. So, yes, if I'm the NBA Jam book guy, bring it on. I'm into it. I love me some NBA Jam.
I think Arcade 1-Up should send you one. They should. I'm sorry. You need You spent years on this.
Yes.
They need to send you one. That's what they need.
I would have loved for them to send me one. Yeah, I actually send them a few copies of the book on the house, and apparently the feedback was really good. They really liked it. And but yeah, nothing ended up materializing. So I bought with my Corona cash, with my stimulus money, I put some aside, and I've got an unbuilt NBA Jam Arcade 1-Up machine sitting downstairs right now. So sometime soon, I'm gonna put it all together.
It'll be weird you playing it, because you're like, oh, well, the reason for that is this. And
it's weird. Yeah. It's like when you watch the same movie too many times and you're like, okay, I know why they did this. I know where this edit happens. It's a funny experience. But of course, you know, I'm still a fan at the end of the day too. So, you know, past the first couple of games where the novelty factor's gone, then I'm going to get into it just as I would when I was a kid.
Is it true that there is the cheat code that if the Pistons play the Bulls start missing shots late in the game? Is this correct?
This is true. Yeah. There's nothing even actually you need to do yourself. You just play the Pistons versus the Bulls. And then because Mark Turmel, the main creator of NBA Jam, was such a big Pistons fan and he was a Michigan native, that the Bulls will start to choke in the fourth quarter. So the Pistons stats will go up, the Bulls stats will go down. So Scottie Pippen, you know, in prime Scottie Pippen, he's gonna start to not look so prime anymore after NBA Jam has its way with him when it comes to that. So yeah, that is a true story. That's how petty of a fan Mark Trammell was. He knew the Bulls were succeeding at the time when the Pistons, of course, were taking a back seat. Bad Boy era was over by the time NBA Jam was being put together. But he was like, this is going to be some way for the Pistons to be ahead. I got to do something for my Pistons.
That has been a rumor for over 2 decades. Like, it's so crazy
right, yeah.
when you look at that. You could tell my fanboy's coming out. You could tell.
Oh, no, I love it, though. My fanboy comes out, too. And, I mean, here's another amazing fact I learned while making the book is that it doesn't just apply to NBA Jam. It applies to NFL Blitz, too. So if you play as the Detroit Lions, they're actually better than other teams. I don't know about the specifics if there's any kind of Pistons Bulls-esque like scenario, but I do know that Mark Trammell did bump up the Lions stats in the background very quietly because of that Detroit connection.
I could just see him there where he's putting in the code, and he's like, haha, take that, Bulls. And he just put it up there. You could just see him doing it. Oh, man, that is awesome. Okay. How can we check out the book and buy it? Because I know it'd be fantastic for any video game nerd or basketball fan like me.
Absolutely, yeah. So if you're into basketball culture, video game culture, you just want the story of how this phenomena happened. There's a lot of rise and fall elements to it, too. A lot of sad things happen throughout this as well. Because, of course, NBA Jam was huge once upon a time, but we haven't seen a game in many moons. But, yeah, so it's over on Amazon right now. Just look up NBA Jam, the book, and you'll find it. The publisher is called Boss Fight Books. You can also buy it from them directly at bossfightbooks.com. And I'm over on Twitter and Instagram at NBA Jam Book. But yeah, if you've got any interest in it, just look up NBA Jam Excerpt 2 or NBA Jam Book Excerpt, and then you'll be able to find it as well. So yeah, it's out there.
And we'll end with this. I love your Twitter account because anytime I feel down, you're just posting random old school video game, like where I swear all of a sudden you just post some Mortal Kombat fatality out of nowhere. You're like, hey, how about this? And I was
absolutely. I love that. You know what I really love about my Twitter account? It's all, the main focus is always going to be old games, and then the 90s NBA culture will be a secondary aspect to it. Mm-hmm. But what I love about that is just that, kind of pretending you're seeing it for the first time, or just like clipping a little moment that you remember really well, like unlocking a secret character or hitting a fatality. I love that stuff, man. It's always so much fun to reminisce too, to be like, this is where I was when I saw, Liu Kang do his friendship dance once upon a time, or this is where I saw somebody do this. So yeah, that's a really special time. And with the access that I got through the book, I've got all kinds of amazing stuff out there and all kinds of amazing sources I found. So if you're into weird old video game stuff, I definitely have the goods. I know where to find the good stuff.
Bonus, is there another book you want to work on for video games?
There definitely is. There definitely is. My dream book. I'll mention it just to put it out there in the universe again. I would love to do a Mortal Kombat book because, I mean, I know these people. My very first ever writing gig ever was for a Mortal Kombat website when I was 12 or 13. So it was very fitting that I ended up working on this NBA Jam book and actually got to talk to some of the people that made Mortal Kombat too. So yeah, Mortal Kombat would be my dream gig. I've got a whole outline out there in my head. You never know. You never know if something like that could happen. But Mortal Kombat is the dream video game series too, because there's so many rise and falls over there and all kinds of amazing stories that still aren't out there.
I'm with you. I will help you write this book.
I appreciate it. You'll be right there.
I will. If I can't help you write it, I will help you fund it. That's all I do.
Okay. I love it. I love the support. Yeah, there we go.
I love it so much. I do. This is where the super nerd and you know what happened? I'd say 2 years ago, I was at that bar in Orlando, and it was like a Sunday night. I got done with work. I said, I'm going to beat this game. I've never done it before in the arcade. And I'm in a suit and tie at a bar beating Mortal Kombat. And I beat it, and now I've beaten it about 20 times over and over again. And then I said, I got to buy this. So I'm telling you, I got to practice at home. For a game that came out in 1992, I got to keep playing. So that is awesome, man. Reyan Ali, thank you so much for doing this, man. I really appreciate it. And seriously, I'm going to link out all the stuff so they can buy the book. And look, man, stay safe out there with your family, okay?
I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me. No, this was a blast, and you stay safe and stay healthy too. Wear a mask.